An update on New York's rollout of legal marijuana sales. Retail sales won't start until later this year, but the actual cannabis product is being grown right now. And there are a lot of questions that come with that. So for more on that, I spoke with Chris Alexander, who leads the state's new Office of Cannabis Management. Chris, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Of course, anytime. So I will start with a question that's probably on everyone's minds that they want me to ask. When will recreational marijuana sales start in New York?
Well, thankfully, to the legislature and the governor, and through the Seeding Opportunity Initiative, we're on track to have adult use sales in the state before the end of the calendar year. So that'll be late fall when we'll see supply start to line the shelves of dispensaries that have been built out by the state.
And where are we in that process now? Are people actively growing right now? What phase are we in?
Well, the office has, and the board has licensed 52 conditional cultivators. These are individuals who have previously participated in the state's hemp program, all small farmers who are, really growing great product for the state, have been licensed conditionally to grow adult use cannabis. And so we're really excited about the work that they've begun. Our office is hard at work drafting regulations for every bit of this program, from the cultivation side down to the dispensary and the whole supply chain included. And so that's where our office is focused on, as well as continuing to staff up and build out the necessary capabilities to continue to oversee the full industry.
So when sales do start, what should people expect to see in their communities? I know that some communities have opted out of retail marijuana sales, but what should people expect in terms of density of storefronts? What would we be seeing when those sales start?
Well, part of the benefit of, and I always say, part of the benefit of not going first is that we're able to learn lessons from other states. And so we're going to be rolling out licenses, particularly dispensary licenses, in waves. To allow for the state and the market to adjust. And so there's no cap on dispensary licenses in the state, but we know that the market will kind of stabilize after some time. And so we'll be focused on making sure there's not over concentration of dispensaries and communities across the state, but at the same time that folks do have access to highly regulated, high quality products. And so you'll see, dispensaries start to come online in the community, and hopefully we have real access for our patients and for consumers across the board as we grow and mature this industry in a couple of years.
Now, as you mentioned, the first licenses will go to people with past cannabis-related convictions, and that's caused a controversy for some people. Can you explain why the state wanted to go that route? Why should these licenses go to these people first?
Absolutely. And really, it's part of the cannabis law. It's part of what's been demanded of our office and required as a component of the MRTA, the law that ended prohibition in the state. It comes with it an acknowledgement that prohibition and its enforcement was always, disproportionately done in certain communities. And so part of what is included in that law is a requirement that those who've been impacted have a meaningful opportunity to participate. And so I do want to correct the record and make sure it's clear that, folks who have the convictions are included as one eligibility criteria point for this initial opportunity. But the additional requirement is that folks have experience owning and operating a business. And so what we think we'll find is not only those who've been most impacted at the front of the line, but those who've been impacted and still have gone on to build and run successful businesses in the state of New York. These folks are successful small business owners who began these opportunities. They just happen to have been swept up in the wave of enforcement related to cannabis prohibition.
You're right. Equity was a really important part of this law. Are there any other ways the state is trying to ensure equity in terms of the cannabis industry as you move forward?
That's really a great question. And I think, I would love to point right back to our farmers. Our farmers, distressed farmers, are part of our equity definition as folks that otherwise would have been left out or left behind, that we are taking a strong interest in making sure they're included and are able to participate. And so the actual conditional cultivation licenses that we have handed out 52 of, and will continue to be handing out in the very near future, really captures that component of our equity definition to ensure that small farmers have a meaningful place to participate here. Also included in that equity definition are service disabled veterans, beyond just those who've been impacted, also service disabled veterans who will also be trying to find ways, creative ways, to ensure have a meaningful way to participate in the industry that we're building.
Now, there's one other concern that was brought up as we were debating this legislation before it passed several years ago and leading up to it, is this concern about impaired drivers impaired by cannabis, people who have used cannabis and then decided to get behind the wheel. So for people who may be worried about that, is the state taking any additional steps to ensure that that doesn't happen, or that police officers can identify when somebody is intoxicated by cannabis?
Absolutely. And thanks for raising that. I mean, we've launched a couple weeks ago our Cannabis Conversation public education campaign. And what that really is focused on is making sure folks understand basically what we did when we ended prohibition. Folks driving across the state have probably noticed the billboards letting you know not to drive high or under the influence of cannabis. This education approach is one that we've learned and really leaned from the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee, which is one of our closest partners here in maintaining road safety in the state. And they've emphasized how important education is in making sure that we keep drivers from driving under the influence on our roads. And so we have already invested resources as a state in expanding the Drug Recognition Expert Program and the A-RIDE programs. These are programs that train officers to better detect substances in the system of drivers. And so we have invested significant resources in expanding those programs for the state, but also taking a strong education approach. And folks can join the cannabis conversation at cannabis.ny.gov. But I'm sure they're seeing the ads on their TVs as well as on social media and the billboards on the highways, and letting them know that if they feel different, they will drive different. And so we're doing a little bit of both, of education and of making sure our law enforcement have the necessary resources.
Now, one last question for you, for people who may be interested in purchasing cannabis when it is at retail shops. We know in nearby states and other states who have legalized the drug, there are caps on how much you can actually buy at the store. Like in Massachusetts, for example, you can only buy 500 milligrams of edible cannabis products. Are we at the phase now where we're setting those regulations, or is that still to come?
We are at the phase where we're setting those regulations, and not just the limitations, but in the way that the form, the manner, the packaging, the labeling, the way that these products are transitioning hands from a retail operation to the consumer. One of the biggest reasons for legalizing cannabis was creating a better regulated product, improving public health outcomes, making sure that people who are choosing to put cannabis in their bodies have a better product that they're using. And so, we're really deep in it now at this point in time. You can tell by the scruff of analyzing what has been helpful in other states to create a better market, and trying to see what's going to be most useful for New Yorkers who are interested in consuming cannabis.
All right, Chris Alexander from the Office of Cannabis Management, thank you so much for all of this information. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.